Well, if one of those opinion surveyors came to your door tonight and asked who is Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, how long would it take you to answer? 1, 2, 3, 4? It's Lionel Bowen, of course, the Attorney-General. He's been Deputy Prime Minister ever since 1983, when the Hawke government was first formed. But Mr. Bowen is very, very low profile. So low profile, in fact, he almost shuns publicity. I mean, sure, he'll come on television and talk about this and that if you ask him nicely, but he's just as happy not to. He lives in a very unpretentious home in his lower middle-class electorate of Kingsford Smith. That's essentially Sydney's southern beaches. And when he's here in Canberra, it's not the Flash Lodge or the first-class hotels for him. No, he lives in a converted garage in the backyard of one of his relatives here. There are few similarities between Lionel Bowen and Gough Whitlam. Only a few. But they include both being lawyers and both having a passionate interest in our Constitution. Both want to change it, bring it up to date, as they'd put it. But their respective methods of achieving that change couldn't be more different. For Whitlam, it was always full frontal confrontation, crash or crash through, and crash he did mostly. But for Lionel Bowen, it's the softly, softly approach. It may be that in the long run, Bowen will achieve as much change as Whitlam, essentially none, but that's yet to be seen. 2 or 3 years ago, when Bowen put forward this idea of a People's Commission to review the Constitution, he was laughed at by many, especially when he appointed the rock singer Peter Garrett to play a role. But that was part of Bowen's sense and skill, bringing in a young and different person like Garrett, who quite evidently from the 1984 election had substantial community support. Well, laughed at or not, this commission has been beavering away without much publicity, and now one of its subcommittees has produced a report that covers and includes that central point of our Constitution that everyone has an opinion on. Did Sir John Kerr take the right, proper and correct action back 12 years ago at lunchtime on the 11th of November 1975? Well, Donald Horne is a very well-known Australian, one of the 7 to serve on this subcommittee that's produced this report. Well, Donald Horne, did Sir John Kerr do the right thing on the 11th of November?
Well, if the advice we've given here is followed, there'll be no opportunity of ever that situation occurring again, because we're recommending that the Senate shouldn't have the power to block supply, and we're also recommending that there be a list of rules about how Governor-Generals can act, and ours didn't allow for a Governor-General to dismiss somebody under those circumstances.
Yes, but you're also very pragmatic in your report, and you acknowledge that a change of that kind is far and away unlikely, highly unlikely.
Well, some of the changes we recommended, I think, could be put in at once. For instance, I don't suppose most Australians know that Queen Elizabeth can actually veto legislation, and we think that possibly we could put that to a referendum and pass it. And another suggestion that we take very seriously is that, as you know, and as the Constitution doesn't even mention the Prime Minister. It doesn't mention the government. It kind of puts up a fantasy which never exists. And we're suggesting that the Constitution be changed so it says the Prime Minister is the head of government, and he remains head of government only as long as he controls a majority in the House of Representatives. That has a chance of going, I think, and that would be a good way of introducing people to the idea that they can change the Constitution. The others might come along later.
Yeah, but you acknowledge that the likelihood of getting taking away from the Senate the power to block supply is just non-existent, really.
I don't think that would happen if it was put up this year, but of course next year going up is a proposal for a fixed term of Parliament which could achieve the same effect. We weren't actually given the job of investigating fixed terms of Parliament, but that could achieve a similar kind of effect.
Right. The other question that comes out of November 1975 that you address on this occasion is whether the Governor-General was right or wrong to have taken outside advice. Namely, when he went and saw Barwick, did he do the right thing? How have you decreed on that?
Well, we've said it's not a matter of the Constitution, but we've suggested advice for a Governor-General to take that kind of advice, because it can give people the wrong idea. It's actually, on that occasion, Sir Garfield Barwick was nothing more than a private individual. He had no more authority than you or I would have had. But to lots of people, they can think, oh, well, yes, you know, he interviewed the Chief Justice, must have been doing the right thing. And we think that's an unfortunate impression to be conveyed, but we don't think it should be limited by the Constitution.
But then why is it wrong? I mean, why shouldn't he go and see one of his mates if...
Well, he can go and see people, but to see in particular the Chief Justice, and what's more, you may possibly remember that Sir John Kerr actually quoted a letter from Barwick.
Yes.
And that seems to... it could be argued that was suggesting to people who didn't know the Constitution very well that somehow the Chief Justice had given him a special backing, which of course was not so, because the Chief Justice on this occasion was of no more significance than you or me.
OK, you addressed this question of the reserve powers. Explain what reserve powers are and what should be done with them.
Yes, well, there's a lot of rubbish talked about reserve powers. Sometimes it sounds as if, the Governor-General could suddenly become a feudal monarch and chop off people's heads. What reserve powers means in Australia is that the Governor-General can appoint or dismiss governments, that he's connected with the calling of elections for the House of Representatives and for double dissolutions of Parliament. And what we're recommending, we differ in the ways in which we think it should be done, but every one of the 7 members of the committee believes that there should be some statement of the Governor-General's powers. And most of those would be mandatory. In other words, it would say to him, the Prime Minister resigns, you do so-and-so. A Prime Minister dies, you should do this. It allows 3 discretions. One of them says, if a Prime Minister has lost the confidence of the House of Representatives but won't resign, well, then you must sack him. Another says, if the government has acted illegally and the High Court has said it's acted illegally, you should sack, and it won't stop acting illegally, you should sack the government. The third is the only real discretionary one, which says that if the government is acting with some gross illegality, which is not a matter the High Court can handle, well, then you may choose to sack the government. That's what he's left with.
Right, right. Now, the Constitution has the Governor-General as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Now, the literalist would say that he's the one that can stand at the top of the trenches and say, charge. Now, you want to stop that?
Yes, well, we ourselves don't think that any Governor-General so far has had that ambition. But if you're cleaning up the Constitution, as well as taking away from Queen Elizabeth the power to veto legislation, you may as well state, I think, quite specifically that the Governor-General is simply a ceremonial head of the armed forces. It's something that could go in along with some other amendments.
Well, and on the monarchy, and this must have stuck in your craw a little bit. I mean, you've got this recommendation forward to take away from the Queen the power to veto legislation, but apart from that, no change.
No, well, it didn't stick in my craw, as a matter of fact. Right from the beginning, the committee, I think it's no secret, there were 3 monarchists on it, 3 Republicans and 1 undeclared person, so that if we'd tossed a coin, we would have come down 4-3 on one side or the other. That seemed a pretty pointless manoeuvre. But what we all believe about this is that there will come some time in Australia's history when it will be evident that the people of Australia want a republic. And when that time comes, there'll be a referendum and there'll be a republic. In the meantime, we wanted to concentrate more on the issues related to 1975 or the issues related to producing a constitution that would make sense in schools so that ordinary citizens could understand it and read it and so forth. And we thought there was no particular point in our coming in on the monarchy-republic question.
Donald Horne, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks very much, Richard.